Very good. I feel like we should be Lindy hopping. So I'm just going to read the first couple of pages of chapter 1 here. One evening, I got a wild hair and drove all night from San Diego to Menlo Park. Why Menlo Park? It had both a triple Michelin star place and a dear old friend, both within spitting distance of the Walmart parking lot, where I could park the unsalted hash, leaving me free to drink as much as I cared to and still be able to walk home and crawl into bed. I'd done a job that turned out better than I expected. Well enough that I was set for the year if I lived carefully. I didn't want to live carefully. The age for that was long past. I wanted to live it up. There'd be more work. I wanted to celebrate. Truth be told, I also didn't want to contemplate the possibility that at the age of 67, the new work might stop coming in. Silicon Valley hates old people, but that was okay because I hated Silicon Valley. Professionally, that is. Getting close to Bakersfield, I pulled the unsalted hash into a rest stop to stretch my legs and check my phone. After a putter around the picnic tables and vending machine, I walked the perimeter of my foolish and ungainly and luxurious tour bus, checking the tires and making sure the cargo compartments were dogged and locked. I climbed back in, checked my sludge levels, and decided that they were low enough that I could use my own toilet. Then, finally, having forced myself to wait, I sat on one of the buttery leather chairs and checked my messages. That's how I learned that Danny Laser was looking for me. He was working the usual channels, DMs from people who I tended to check in with when I was looking for work, and it put a shine on my evening, because 67 or no, there was always work for someone with my skill set. Danny Laser had a problem with his trustless coin keys, which relied on the best protected cryptographic secrets in the world, nominally. So I messaged him. One rest stop later, just past Gilroy, I got his reply. He was eager to see me. Would I call on him at his home in Palo Alto? My pathetic little ego swelled up at his eagerness. I told him I had a big dinner planned the next night, but I'd see him the morning after. Truth be told, putting off a man as important as Danny Laser, even for 24 hours, made me feel more important still. I could tell from his reply that the delay chafed at him. I felt petty, but not so much so that I canceled my dinner. My dear old friend was a lively sort, and it was possible we'd walk from the restaurant to her place for an hour or 3 before I returned to the Walmart parking lot. Dinner didn't disappoint, and neither did the fun and games afterward. It was a very nice capstone to a very successful job and a very good prelude to another job for one of the nicest rich men or richest nice men in all of Silicon Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. So, people love stories of rich D-bags going to jail.
Yeah, this is my Panama Papers fanfic.
So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is Sam Bankman, his name is literally Bankman.
Yeah, Bankman-Fried, yeah.
Fried, and FTX, Silicon Valley Bank, blah, 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 all the shit that went on over the pandemic, the collapses. How is cryptocurrency capable of giving you the narrative juice to finish and construct a novel?
So foundationally, this is a book about the curdling of the dream of technology as a force for human liberation at the hands of finance capital, right? And finance has its own performative complexity. I mean, we've all met tech people who try to bamboozle us with bullshit, but in finance, there's actually a term of art for this. It's MIGO, which stands for my eyes glaze over, and this is like any kind of performative complexity where you make something seem hard to understand because it's complex, but really it's complex so that it will be hard to understand. If you give someone a prospectus that's thick enough, they'll assume that there's something important in it, the way that if you give them a pile of shit that's big enough, they'll assume there's a pony underneath it. And cryptocurrency was like a really solid version of this MIGO thing, where the harder you looked at it, the less compelling it got, but you have to peel back so many layers. It's like a matryoshka where you open the outside layer and then the next doll and the next doll and the next doll, and you finally get to the middle, it's just full of shit. The foundation was so weak, but it took so much penetrating excavation to get to that foundation and realize that it was just, you know, performative nonsense. And so you couldn't ask for like a more pure example of a tech scam than that, right? Where you just prey on people's inability to understand some combination of finance and tech. You know, and the golden day of the con, right? The 1920s when Oliver Morrow wrote The Big Con, which later became the movie The Sting. There were ropers who would travel the railroads looking for suckers. And if they met a successful horse race tout, they would play a stock swindle with them. And if they met a successful stockbroker, they'd play a horse race swindle with them. Right? They would just assume that if you knew something about something, then you would assume you knew something about everything. And that would make you an easy mark. And with crypto, you've got the intersection of needing to understand how to read a computer program and needing to understand how to read a prospectus. And most people can't read either. Very few people can read one of them. But the Venn diagram intersection of people who can read both of them isn't so much like an overlap as it is a sphincter. And so there was always a sucker you could play with it.
Yeah, I mean, let's go straight to enshittification.
Yeah, sure. Is that the prompt?
That's the prompt.
So I've been writing lately about how platforms go bad and why platforms go bad. And I have a kind of grand unified field theory of why platforms are all terrible now. And the internet really is worse, right? Like, I am now 51 years old, and you know, as is inevitably the case when you turn 50, the American Association of Retired People hunts you down and sends you a pitch for a membership, as well as a card instructing you to start telling people that everything used to be better and now it's terrible. But I do think that, like, the web was better when it wasn't just 5 giant websites filled with screenshots of text from the other 4. And I don't think that happened, you know, like by accident, and I don't think it was the great forces of history. I think we made policy choices that created it. So on the one hand, we just stopped enforcing competition law. We let companies buy all their competitors. That left them undisciplined by competition. It meant that you couldn't outrun them. If you were like, Facebook sucks, I'll go to Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg gets up at 2:30 in the morning, sends his CFO an email saying, let's buy Instagram. Now you're a Facebook user again, right? So on the one hand, there's all of that. But that's true of everything, right? I don't have to tell Canadians about the problems with market consolidation. TELUS, Bell, Loblaws, I mean, you name it, right? This is the land of the monopoly. You know, New Brunswick is owned by one family, right? But in tech, there are these other unique characteristics. Tech is very flexible, right? If you're running a tech platform, you have a lot of knobs you can twiddle to change the rules. When Galen Weston wants to steal from you by gouging you on bread, he needs an army of kids on roller skates with pricing guns to reprice the bread. When Jeff Bezos wants to gouge you on bread on Amazon Fresh, he twiddles a knob or moves a slider and the prices just change. That flexibility makes it very hard for platform users to not only figure out what the platform rules are, but get one up on them. So, you know, Uber drivers have this problem all the time. Uber drivers divide themselves into 2 categories, ants and pickers. Ants are drivers who take whatever ride comes along. Pickers wait for the really good rides. Uber has an algorithm that, if you're a picker, offers you more money per ride until you stop doing whatever it is you were doing that allowed you to be a picker, become a full-time driver, which is to say an ant, and then drops your compensation to ant level. Right? Because the rules are just always changing. If you look at Uber drivers' social media, it's just full of Uber drivers who are like driving every hour that God sends and think that they're bad at Uber somehow because they're getting a bad payout. And then there are other people who are doing really well who think they're good at Uber. You're not good at the app, right? The app has just figured out that, like, just like the carny at the CNE who gives you a giant teddy bear if you're the first customer at 10 in the morning, so you walk around all day making people think that they can get 5 balls in a peach basket and get a giant teddy bear of their own. Uber is like giving you a giant teddy bear in the form of a supernormal payout so that you'll go on social media and tell Uber drivers that there's gold in their rides, right? So on the one hand, there's tons of twiddling going on by the platforms that make it very hard for platform users to figure out how to get the most out of the platform. And on the other hand, there are laws that make it illegal to twiddle back, right? You're not allowed to reverse engineer. You're not allowed to use your own bots or your own scrapers or any of those other things, an ad blocker. Ad blockers on the web are everywhere. 1 in 4 web users has an ad blocker. It's the largest consumer boycott in history. To ad block apps, you need to reverse engineer them first. And thanks to BC's own James Moore, former MP for Coquitlam, it's a felony to reverse engineer the app. And so you don't get to ad block. And so the platforms can twiddle you, but you can't twiddle them back. And so this produces the enshittification life cycle, where in step one, the platform twiddles the knobs to give end users a really good deal. The Saudi royal family pumped $31 billion into Uber. They lost 41 cents on the dollar for 12 years. Who wouldn't want to ride in a cab where 41% of the fare is being picked up by the Saudi royal family? No bone saws involved, right? So you get the users in, they get locked in, right? Your public transit gets defunded, the cab drivers all go out of business. All your local retailers stop existing because everyone's using Amazon, or you and all your friends are on Facebook and you can't leave because they're there and they can't leave because you're there, you're holding each other hostage. When you're locked in, they would business customers. So Facebook once promised they would never spy on their users. Do you remember that? Don't use MySpace. It's owned by the crapulent, senescent Australian evil billionaire. Use Amazon or use Facebook. We're the service that'll never spy on you. Once everyone's logged in, they're like, we changed our mind. Right? We're going to spy on you, and we're going to bring in advertisers. We're going to give them a really good deal, the ability to spy on you and target you with ads. We're going to bring in publishers. We're going to break the deal we offered you, which is like show up on Facebook, tell us who matters to you, and we'll just show you everything that they post. We're going to break that deal. Publishers show up. We're going to like non-consensually ram the excerpts that they post to Facebook into your eyeballs for their benefit. So publishers pile in. They get tons of traffic being funneled to their website because it's just an excerpt and a link. But then Facebook starts to withdraw the surpluses from the advertisers. They rig the ad market. They charge more. They give publishers less. Publishers who post excerpts don't get reach. They have to post the whole article. Then they have to post the whole article without a link, so they can only monetize on Facebook. And then Facebook starts to cheat the advertisers and the publishers. They do this illegal deal with Google called Jedi Blue, where they rig the ad market to get more money for themselves. So this is stage three. First, the surpluses are given to users, stage one. Then they're given to business customers, stage two. And they're taken for the shareholders, stage three. And the equilibrium they want is just enough goodies left in the service that you stay, right? Not one goodie more, right? Any goodies that aren't necessary to keep you locked in belong rightfully to those shareholders, but they want to leave just enough to leave you locked in. And surfing that equilibrium of just enough but no more, it's very hard, because one scandal can just topple it over, right? Privacy scandal, mass shooting that gets live streamed, whistleblowers, Cambridge Analytica. All of a sudden people are like, I couldn't imagine living without this yesterday, now I can't imagine staying. And when that happens, the platform owners go berserk, because they think that they're the masters of the universe, and all they are people who've got unlimited access to the capital markets. And so then they're like, I've changed my mind. I've been thinking about it really hard. I know that you all like talking to each other, but have you considered that the future is really that you're all going to be legless, sexless, low polygon, animated characters in a heavily surveilled environment based on a satirical idea from a dystopian science fiction novel from 20 years ago? You should think hard about this, because it is your future, right? And that's when the whole thing goes to shit. That's final enshittification. And so... I think we need to be really less interested now in how we make Mark Zuckerberg better, and we need to be more interested in how we make it easier to leave his company. Right? We need to make departing the platform. We need to make the platforms irrelevant, not good. They're in terminal enshittification. They're not going to be good. We just need to make it easy to go. So I have a book coming out from Verso in September. I write a lot when I'm anxious. Called The Internet Con, How to Seize the Means of Computation. That is about how we're going to get away from the platforms, how we're going to dismantle big tech.
Beautiful. Okay. So speaking of weird valuations in the internet and people paying for things that don't really exist, what the fuck is going on with the blue checks?
That's just more enshittification, right? It's just more enshittification. It's just, and we owe Musk a weird vote of thanks in the same way that we owe Trump a weird vote of thanks, because both of them take the process that other people do subtly and slowly, such that it's hard to point at it and go, that's what's going on. And they just grab the crayon in their fist and they just draw in great, big, easy to see lines. And Musk is just, Facebook has a $12 blue check. They just don't talk about it in the same terms, right? TikTok will have one when they can too. And I think the point about all of this is that although individually these guys are just bozos, no worse, no better than anyone else, ordinary mediocrities, the determinant of how they behave is not their moral character. There are a few people who are involved in tech, who care about tech. I think a lot of Automatic, the company that does WordPress, and Matt Mullenweg, he's a comrade, he's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. You know, he's a good guy, and I think that it makes a difference, right, in that instance. But I think that that's at the margins. Right down the middle, the thing that determines how a company behaves is not the moral character of the firm. It's whether it's disciplined by a mix of competition and regulation. And those are very intimately related. It's very hard to regulate a company that doesn't have competition, because when you say, hey, let's have a hearing and ask whether or not the tar sands are the filthiest oil in the world, and everyone who shows up is part of a heavily concentrated tar sands industry, they're all like, we've done the math and it's actually great.
No.
And the only
Super clean.
Yeah, the only people who show up on the other side are like academics, First Nations people, activists, who just don't speak with the same authority as someone from industry. If there were 100 telcos in Canada, the next time the CRTC had a hearing about net neutrality, not only could those telcos not get together and agree on a common lobbying position, they couldn't even agree where to get together or how to cater the meeting, right? And it's the concentration that begets regulatory failures and capture. And so concentration is the root of all evil. Canada has the least fit for purpose competition law in the world, I think, at this point. It is under reassessment right now. I urge you to look into it, talk to your MP about it. This is an inflection point where all over the world, governments are reassessing whether or not corporations should be so big and powerful that governments are irrelevant. You'd think that this would have been a thing that they were interested in before now. But everywhere you go, you see it. It's happening in the UK, where they just dropped an amazing new competition law. It's going up before Parliament. The Chinese cyberspace regulation is full of pro-competitive stuff. I mean, it's wild. You get ghouls like Nick Clegg, who's the failed deputy prime minister of the UK, now gets $4 million a year to pimp Facebook to other governments, who's like, we can't break up Facebook because they keep Europe safe from China's national champions, and that's how we'll defend European cyberspace. And like, Clegg has somehow missed the fact that Xi Jinping is like rounding up Chinese tech executives and putting them in gulags. This is, I mean, not that I advocate putting anyone in gulags, right? But the idea that the Chinese state views its tech giants as sources of soft power rather than as rivals, it's just like belied by the evidence. You know, he should go have a word with Jack Ma and find out the extent to which he's nice and cozy with good old Xi Jinping, because he's not. They are bitter enemies. And that's how we should view our own tech barons, as our bitter enemies. They don't have to go to gulags, but we shouldn't be exalting them as you know, heroes. We should be treating them with the suspicion that any monopolist is due.
Hell yeah. So I got two more, and then I think we should open it up to the floor. That's all right. So I'm just going to give you another prompt here. Privacy is a classic consumer surplus.
It's true, absolutely, right? It's a thing that matters to you, and that other firms, if they can take it away from you, can use to allocate goodies to themselves that they get at your benefit. They can figure out how to market to you, they can figure out how to target you, they can figure out how to compromise you, they can figure out how to sell that information to other firms. The privacy is a public good, it's a shared good, it's not a thing that is an individual thing. There's a lot of people who are like, well, we should just create a tradable privacy right? If you could sell your privacy, then everything would be better. Because the problem is that you're not paying for the product, you're not paying for the product, you're the product. It's not true. If a company can get away with treating you as the product, they will. Paying them will not make them respect you, right? They respect you if they fear losing your business or being fined for abusing you. Everything else is a rounding error in their conduct. And the problem with saying, well, if we just sold our data, it would be fine. There's one problem is that it turns privacy into a luxury good, which is not right. In fact, the people who get most viciously abused by privacy violations are the most vulnerable among us, who are subject to predatory lending and a whole bunch of other discriminatory conducts that are enabled by mass surveillance. But also, the idea that you own your personal information ignores the blended nature of that personal information. Like, who owns the fact that your mother is your mother? Is it you or is it her? Right? If your mother abused you and you want to go public with that, does she get a veto because you have joint ownership of the fact that your mother is your mother? Right? That if your friend knows that your mother is your mother and neither you nor she are willing to sell that fact, can he sell it and undercut you? Right? It doesn't make any sense as a market. It makes sense only if you understand that it's valuable because it shouldn't be sold, right? People are valuable not because we put a high price on them, but because we put no price on them. You're a monster if you put a price on people. Our private data is valuable because it doesn't lend itself to market-based transactions. It needs its own vocabulary, its own regulation, its own way of thinking about it. It's not to say that there shouldn't be protections for privacy, but those protections do not emerge from pricing privacy.
Okay. So last one for me. Obviously, Twitter is garbage. Obviously, Facebook is garbage. Obviously, we all want to see everyone's lunch on Instagram. But so as Elon was making the purchase and being a dick, everyone was thinking, you know what? I got to get myself a Mastodon account.
Sure.
So
I like Mastodon a lot. I
Yeah?
think Mastodon is one of those services that fails better than it works so far.
Yeah, and failure is good.
Yeah,
right?
graceful failure is very good. So like Mastodon has got this hidden feature that you wouldn't ever discover until something went wrong. But on Mastodon, if the person who runs your server and you don't get along, you can, with one click, export all the data of everyone who follows you and everyone who you follow. And then you can go to another server and re-upload it, and like within a few minutes, you're re-established somewhere else. What that means is that you don't need your administrator to be good. You just need them to be gone, right? You can treat them as damage and route around them. And so a lot of people are like, someone better than Elon Musk should run Twitter. Arguably, that's true. But wouldn't it be great if it turned out that someone who's not the ideal person had made themselves czar for life of your social media and all the connections that matter to you, if you could just hit the bricks without incurring the cost of saying goodbye to all the people who matter to you, if you could just go somewhere else. So, Mastodon's got some onboarding problems, and there's a very opinionated set of design decisions that went into it, some of which I think are good and some of which are not great. The fact that you can't search Mastodon across the whole service, like on the one hand, it stops you from searching for like people who use the word pronoun and then showing up and going, oh, you're a dumb SJW, right? On the other hand, it means that you can't find your people. It's really hard. There's no system-wide search. And so, these things are kind of working themselves out. Democracy is messy, right? But on the other hand, if you want a new feature on Twitter, the only way you can get it is by convincing Elon Musk that it should exist. If you want a new feature on Mastodon, either you can make it if you have the technical capability, or you can pay someone to make it. Now that's not the same as everyone can make new features for Mastodon, but it's a much larger pool of people than can make new features on Twitter. And so, it would be great to democratize it further. It would be great to have an even greater set of levers that people can pull on to exercise technical self-determination. But the fact that there are so many more levers there than we have in any other service is very exciting. There's a service called Blue Sky that one of the founders of Twitter has backed. Nominally, it has federation. It has a lot of very interesting features, but it's all run on one server right now. And until and unless they figure out how to actually start federating, it is federated in name only. And that means that if you don't like the way it's being run, you don't have anywhere to go. And so that is like it leaves the people who run it in a state where they are not being disciplined by the fear of losing your business. And even if now they're making good calls, when push comes to shove, the fact that they know you can't go anywhere else without saying goodbye to everyone who matters to you there is going to weigh on their minds. And it will push them towards making decisions that are better for them than they are for you.
Beautiful. We're going to go to the audience right now. I know we have someone in the room here today. Ian Linkletter, are you here? Yeah. How you doing? So, Ian, do you want to? I know we were chatting in the back channels on Twitter, and I know that you have a question for Cory. Do you want to lay it on us right now?
Where do I go?
Just come on up here, and I will give you the microphone.
Ian is the whistleblower from UBC who exposed wrongdoing with Proctorio, the remote proctoring service that was abusing kids, who is now facing civil liability, very serious civil liability in BC because this American company is suing them.
So yeah, Cory, thank you so much for all the support as I go through that. My question is about whistleblowers and other people that want to hold trillion-dollar companies to account in the way that you have. What advice would you say to somebody who is struggling with something in their heart that they have to say but they know they shouldn't?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's a question I want to ask you. You know, at EFF we've had loads and loads of people who've shown up at our door to blow the whistle, and they make a very brave and difficult decision. It's one that implicates their family and makes their life, you know, makes their sort of side hustle for between 2 and 10 years fighting in court and being a professional litigant, and it sucks. It's the world's worst job. And they do it anyway because it matters to them. And, you know, I want to ask you, like, you're living it. I've only seen it from the outside. What's your advice to people about to make a decision like yours?
Wow. I didn't sign up for this part. You know, I think...
Yeah, context. Can we get some context for the audience?
Okay, you told me not to do that.
You know what?
So how about, can I run it down really quick and you tell me if I get it right or
You'll do a
wrong?
great job.
Proctorio is this extraordinarily dirty company that spies on you while you take tests. They're run by a very abusive jerk who has engaged in all kinds of scummy conduct, like when students complain, he doxes them. They had made a bunch of claims about how their technology worked that were public-facing claims, but in the educator materials, there were private-facing claims that were different. Ian, in his role at UBC, saw these documents, these videos. They were on YouTube. They were videos that anyone could look at, but the URL wasn't listed. YouTube's terms of service say unlisted URLs can be viewed by anyone. You grant a license for anyone to see it. Ian took to Twitter and said, I have discovered that these things that they claim are not true. Here's what's really going on with our kids who are being asked to sit their exams under the glaring eye of this American company that are getting lots and lots of public money all across Canada. And they said that he had breached their copyright by disclosing the URLs of videos that they put on YouTube. And what?
Is that predatory?
It's very predatory, and also that he had breached his confidentiality duty, even though all of these videos were available elsewhere, the information in the videos were available elsewhere on the web. BC has a very new anti-SLAPP statute that nominally defends people like Ian from these cases. The lower court made a bunch of very bad calls, and then the appeals court upheld those very bad calls, and so now it's up to Ian whether he wants to try his chances with the Supreme Court.
And I told Cory this earlier, but I am going to try my chances.
Yeah.
I guess answering my own question, you know, I never thought that I'd get in trouble sharing links to YouTube videos. That seems like kind of the epitome of what's okay to share. But, you know, anytime that you take on a big company that has no interest other than to hurt the people that call them out for what's bad, you're taking a risk. And I guess in my case, I can't go back in time. I can't not take that risk, but if I had to, I think that I would again. And that's a personal decision that everybody has to deal with. It's been 2.5 years in my life. It'll probably be another 3 or 4 more. But you know, through the support of Cory and many other awesome people, it's something that I can take on and my family can take on. So thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Ian.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other? Yeah, right over here. Come on up.
All right.
Oh, you got it on your phone?
Well, kind of. So, like,
Remember,
yeah, questions quick.
Right.
So, I think this may be leading to the book you just announced, but I had the question prep, so I wanted to run it back
Right.
down. So, Mastodon. You are not a user on Mastodon, not the traditional corporate sense, right? You are a citizen, right? Volunteer, donor, contributor,
Yeah, sure.
etc. I, on Mastodon, run into people who are very trapped in user mentality.
Sure.
Literally talk
And
about
what
user
do you tell them?
acquisition, and you're like, it's a free service.
Okay, question.
Right.
So how do we change from guys, it's a free service, you're not a user, you're a citizen? Like,
Right.
how do we make that shift so that we can start having Mastodon?
I mean, it's a good question. I think that norms are slow. They take a long time to develop. I think that modeling good Mastodon behavior is great. I mean, Mastodon is not a utopia, but one of the things that's really interesting about Mastodon is when people have problems, there's a lot of people who really believe in it and kind of leap into the fray to try and help newbies get their feet under them and so on. And I think that oftentimes it's if you're accustomed to using, say, Twitter, it's easy to assume that those people are part of the service. You know, they're the staff. And if you can make it clear that this is actually just what you do for the other people there, then you confer this new norm, and it will take a long time to take root. It's a slow, difficult business, but norms are resilient in a way that paid positions are not. Norms are the things that stay, and there's actually a term for this out of the library science literature. Gosh, I'm blanking the name of the woman who wrote this paper, but it's called vocational awe. People do jobs because they matter to them. And this makes certain classes of workers very exploitable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, there's a thing that your boss will do that'll be like, yeah, I'm not paying you enough to live on, but what are you going to do, leave those old people in their beds to get bed sores? No, you're going to show up for work, even if I cut your wages again. And, you know, teachers, librarians, artists go through this, health workers and so on, people who work in nurseries, they are all, you know, justly in possession of this vocational law, but it also makes them exploitable.
Yeah. Yeah, we call those non-profit employees
Yeah.
here in Vancouver. Thank you for the question. Yeah, come on up. Come on over. You can do it. You can make way. Thanks.
Hi, I have a question within the context of your advocacy for Creative Commons, open access to research.
Yeah.
Given the recent wins of copyleft and open access, what are your thoughts on the inclusion of open data sets into various generative AI systems?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is a big, complicated issue, and I'm going to answer it by way of an analogy to what happened with sampling. When sampling started, there were a lot of musicians whose work was being sampled who said that the musicians who were doing the sampling were thieves. And they said that you cannot make art by stealing. And so this was bad work. And they argued that they should have the individual bargainable right to decide who could sample their work, which they eventually got, not through a change in law, but through jurisprudence and changes in the practice. And the big three record labels, Sony, Warner, and Universal, who control 70% of all the commercial music recordings ever made. And today, if you want to sample, you have to go to one of the labels, because they'll only let you sample if you're already signed to them. When you sign to them, you have to sign away the right to control your samples. So you lose the right to control your samples, and you have to pay to sample, as does everyone who you might sample. And so that means that when you pay for the samples, the money doesn't go to another artist, it goes to their shareholders. So now we have this world where all artists are worse off. And to make things worse, there's groups of artists who made work before the sampling regime came in who couldn't make that work again today. If you were to remake Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys, or It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, each one of those CDs would have to sell for $150 to clear those samples, right? So we've also rendered a genre of music extinct because of this individual bargainable right that doesn't make any artist better off. And on top of that, there are artists who are kind of caught in between, like De La Soul, really important hip-hop act, whose work could never be cleared for streaming. So for 15 years, it just wasn't available. As of March, some of their work is coming back online, but the frontman died in February, after 15 years of his music not being heard. And so this has made everyone worse off. So today, in AI, which, let's be clear, it's not artificial, it's not intelligent, and OpenAI isn't open. You have people who say, when you train, you steal. And you cannot make art by stealing, but it's not art, right? It's not good. It's not only not good art, it's not art at all. And they aim that claim primarily at people who are doing weird things on social media. And maybe some of that stuff is hacky and not great. I think early sampling was probably hacky and not great too, but maybe in 10 years we'll look back on it and say, I can't believe we ever thought that would be art. Or maybe in 10 years we'll look back and say, I can't believe we ever thought that wasn't art. But meanwhile, their answer in both cases is sampling should be a copyright scoped activity that we should have the individual bargainable right to do. Now, as a legal matter, it's not, right? Studying a work, like making inferences from a work by closely studying it, or making a transitory copy in order to do so, just very clearly, like, not even close. This has nothing to do with whether it's open access or not, right? There's just no copyright implied here, right? That it's very clear that this is not a copyright violation. But maybe we could make it one, right? Maybe we could amend the law to say that a close study of a work for the purpose of making a model should be a thing that individual creators should have the right to bargain with. The problem is that they're bargaining into a market that looks just like the music industry. In fact, if anything, it's more concentrated than the music industry was when sampling became a clearable right. And we're seeing what that would look like already. If you're a voice actor, the largest employer for your work is the game sector. When you sit down to record game voiceovers now, every session begins with, "My name is Cory Doctorow, and I hereby sign away the right to sample, to train a model with this recording session." They have the motive, means, and opportunity to replace us with algorithmic output and fire our asses. In fact, every time you hear Morgan Stanley get really horny on Maine about the $13 trillion opportunity in AI, what they mean is $13 trillion worth of workers' wages can be eliminated. That's all they mean. And so the problem is that if we create an individual bargainable right to control training, and that right is immediately transferred to an incredibly concentrated entertainment sector with 5 giant publishers, 4 giant studios, 3 giant labels, 2 giant ad tech companies, and 1 company that controls all the ebooks and audiobooks, then they will fire our asses, and they'll do it without violating this new copyright law we created. They'll do it by obeying the new copyright law that we've created that gives them control over it, and will extinguish all those weirdos doing stuff on social media. So again, this is the worst of all worlds, like we got with sampling. So the question is, what can we do about it? Because they definitely want to fire our asses. So how do we defend our jobs, right? Well, there's a couple of possibilities. In music, in addition to the individual bargainable right, there are collective rights. Every musician, and indeed every person, has the right to record any song once it's been recorded once. Paul Anka didn't give permission to Sid Vicious to record My Way. Sid Vicious just paid the mechanical rate. And you can see this play out in the real world, even with extremely powerful and successful musicians, where individual bargaining doesn't help them, but the collective right does. So Taylor Swift, her masters are owned by an evil private equity billionaire who just wanted to spite her because they dislike each other personally. And so after he sold the portfolio that he bought the rights through, he kept just her rights so that she would know that every time someone enjoyed some of her music, he was getting richer, just to spite her. He's an enormous prick. So she had offered to buy the music back from him. She'd offered him millions of dollars. He refused. But because everyone has the right to record a Taylor Swift album, so does Taylor Swift. And she's re-recorded those albums.
Yeah.
And you can now get the Taylor Swift version or the evil PE guy version. And when you get the Taylor Swift version, she gets money and he doesn't. So a collective right is actually a way to prevent the shifting of capital from labor to our bosses, right? It changes the distributional outcome. So that's one thing we could do. We could create a collective license for our work. There's problems with collecting societies. They're not always the cleanest operations. It's the 21st century. Maybe we could make a better one. But there's another possibility, which is the poison pill. So the US Copyright Office has been pretty clear that only human creativity creates copyrights, is entitled to copyrights. This is what the monkey selfie was about. A monkey just doesn't get a copyright even if they pick up a camera and take a selfie of themselves. Only a human can. And they've said algorithms and their outputs are not entitled to copyrights. So we go to Disney and we say, all right, guys, you absolutely have the power to make everyone who's an animator, even if they're unionized. I'm in the Animators Guild. I've written some animation, right? They could put it in our next contract that anytime we do work, they get to train a model with it. They can fire every animator in Burbank, and they can make new Pixar movies by typing some prompts into a keyboard, going out for a 3-martini lunch at the smokehouse, coming back, and there's a new Pixar movie on their hard drive. But if we say to them, sure, you can do that, you don't get any copyright in it.
Yeah.
And anyone can sell it, and you can't stop them, they'll be like, yeah, we hate paying our workers' wages, but we hate not having perpetual copyright even more. We're going to keep the animators on staff, right? So there are a lot of ways that we can address these issues. They are orthogonal to the copyright question. They're really questions of collective bargaining, market structure, and if we fall into the individual tradable right, if we allow ourselves to view ourselves as like LLCs, the portfolio, bargaining one company to another with these big multinationals, instead of seeing ourselves as a workforce that have been atomized through misclassification, then we're going to end up just like musicians did with sampling. Thanks.